afternoon. Welcome to our webinar. We are so excited to have Adam and Kevin here from Princeton University. I will let them tell us a little bit about who they are. But before we start, just so everyone who's watching knows, we are recording this webinar and we will have available afterwards for you to watch over and over and over again or to send to your colleagues. And if you have any questions, feel free to ask them throughout. I will be reading them and adding them in as they make sense, or if they don't necessarily fit with the flow, we'll save them to the end. So let's get started. Adam, Kevin, thank you so much for joining me today.
Oh, you're welcome.
Thanks for having us.
So I want to get a bit of an overview of what each of you does at Princeton. Let's start with you, Adam. What's your role?
I'm one of two controls engineers at Princeton. So basically anything that has to do with building automation, we're hands-on. As far from meters to fuel panels to sensors, everything comes to construction and ongoing day-to-day work.
Okay. And Kevin, what's your role?
So I'm with the central IT organization, which at Princeton is called the Office of Information Technology, or OIT, and I'm responsible for critical infrastructure and also for overseeing our university data centers.
Okay, awesome. And what are your backgrounds? So how did you guys get into this? What were you doing before you were at Princeton? We'll start with Kevin this time.
So my background is mixed, which is actually a good fit for Princeton. I graduated with a degree in mechanical engineering and then promptly never actually did mechanical engineering. I went into the aerospace industry and worked in a robotic simulation, which I guess is a little bit of mechanical engineering. But then I went to a startup, and then I went into networking, which is sort of the IT side of how I got into Princeton. And then I was also a consultant for corporate and enterprise infrastructure kinds of projects with a company based out of Chicago. And then I came to Princeton in late 2015.
Okay, so really varied background,
yeah.
Which is why you're such an asset. How about you, Adam? What were you doing before Princeton?
So I've been at Princeton about 5 years. Before that, I was at Siemens Building Technologies for 15 years. I was a service technician, controls man. Before that, I went to school to be actually a power plant operator. So.
Great. All right, that makes sense why you're in controls. So we're here today to talk about how the sort of operational technology, building automation side, and the IT side work together. So can you tell me a bit about what projects you two work together on?
Sure. So my role was actually created within IT to specifically be a asset to the operational technology folks. So I almost from the very beginning when I started at Princeton started reaching out and working with people in facilities mostly, although there are other departments that have operational technology in the critical infrastructure realm. And of the various departments within facilities, controls engineering is one of the ones that I interact a lot with in my role for data center facilities because they have a remarkable amount of technology in our data centers that keeps it running properly. And on the other side of things, in my role as critical infrastructure, they depend a lot on the services that IT provides to keep their building automation control systems up and running.
So it's really a give and take.
Yes. It's a good
Awesome.
collaboration.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Adam, anything to add on that?
Just we collaborate on, if we need them to do our job.
Yeah. And so how do you divide up projects? Is it sort of one of you will own it and ask the other to come and consult on it, or how does that relationship work?
I think whoever's driving the project, and whoever asks for the support. If we have an idea that we want to implement, like add new software to integrate something, we have to go to IT to secure a server or virtual server and help implement.
Great, yeah, and then you kind of take it together from there.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay. And how do you sort of bridge that gap? So obviously that's why you exist, and that's why your job exists. What are some but what are some things that you have done to increase that collaboration? When you first started, how did you bridge the gap? How did you figure out how you're going to work together?
Right. So I had a little bit of an advantage in that I came in with support from both facilities and IT who had recognized that there was, in fact, a gap between information technology and operational technologies, which I'm not sure every organization acknowledges or really plans for. So
Yeah.
when I came in, my job was a little bit easier in that both sides expected to have a person in this role who could speak the language, number one, communicate effectively with the various teams that both operate the technologies that are important for our critical operations, as well as the IT side, which is supplying all of this valuable underlying technology to make things work, hopefully reliably, and in a way that doesn't impede performance. But the first thing that I did, really, with my manager's permission and encouragement, was really just to spend a lot of time talking with people. And it was talking not only with the people who own operational technology, but all the people on the periphery, the people who manage those people. A lot of people within IT, I can tell you that it's not just a gap between the central IT organization and facilities and others. It is a gap between even within those organizations. The central IT organization here at Princeton is roughly 300 plus people and six sub-departments, and facilities is even larger. So it really takes a lot of time, and you have to be supported. You have to have people willing to recognize that there is a need and willing to sit down and talk with you about what that need might be, and also how things are set up. I mean, you can't really determine where to help until you sort of understand the landscape of what's already in
Yeah, absolutely. Were there any specific areas that, so clearly you were brought in because there was some disconnect there between the two departments, or many departments on each side. Were there any specific areas that they were really hoping to sort of, for you to start with, that were high challenge areas that eye to eye on?
There was one specifically. It did not directly involve Adam's team, but it was regarding a large SCADA upgrade that they were doing at our cogeneration power plant. And that was something that they'd already started before I got to Princeton, but which was in need of somebody who really could, in fact, speak both languages, and actually a textbook case of the fact that both sides were actually already talking, but perhaps not really understanding the exact need that was required as the SCADA upgrade controls were being planned out. And we were fortunate that we had excellent vendors who we were working with, and people who really did want to come together and plan out the best possible upgrade path we could handle. And that was really a project that has continued on till today. It's still, even though the controls upgrade is in place and went well, there are still lingering items that need to be addressed from that project.
Yeah, those projects always end up being much longer than maybe initially anticipated.
Certainly are.
Adam, anything to add of just areas that you guys sort of struggle to see eye to eye, maybe before Kevin came in, or maybe still are areas of sort of challenge because you come from different worlds?
Yeah, definitely. I'm not in what year it was, but we saw a need to create private VLANs for the building automation system at Princeton. It's easy to maintain, it's especially with BackNet and having BBB routers. So had a meeting with all the heads from all the departments, IT, facility. Just tried to tell them how important the building automation system is. That it's not the same as like your computer in your office.
Yeah.
Old devices that have life safety, animal health. once you brought all those heads together, it was clear to them that how important it is for building automation systems, reliable and easy to maintain.
Right. But it really took you guys saying, we need a VLAN, and then going to them and great.
Pretty much every building, hundreds of buildings, had their own network in the building. You know, BackNet, you'd have a BBMD table for every single building. That was just a nightmare to manage. So having that private VLAN, we have two now, but way easier than 200.
Yeah. Well, and one thing that we come across all the time is the way that BackNet's laid out is not necessarily the way that IT people typically think of networks. Broadcast is horrible in IT, but it's a very common thing in BackNet, and so trying to have both sides understand that, I can see that would be challenging. So we have a project like that. I mean, that one is low cost, but I think you're putting in a bunch of FTs or a bunch of devices, and you need these switches. How do budgets work? Who pays for what? Who initiates? Walk me through that.
So from the IT side, essentially the central IT organization is responsible for everything up to where the equipment plugs into. So if it requires new Ethernet switches or something of that nature, then the central IT organization would take care of that. One of the things that we have not been doing up till this point is providing much in the way of wireless access for building control systems or other operational technology systems, and that will be changing as well. And when that changes, we would also be responsible for making sure that access points providing Wi-Fi are available for operational technology. So essentially, we pay, the central IT organization pays for those elements. And as we move into then the actual applications, that tends to be where the external department, in this case, Adam's department, would pay.
Great. So if you're doing a big project, you're bringing in vendors, there's bids involved. How do you work together to choose what vendors and make sure that you get a vendor who satisfies both departments?
So I'm going through this now, actually. Companies for meter reporting. We have about 300, a little over 300 meters on campus, fuel, water, steam, electric. And we're basically using spreadsheets to track all of our energy data. So to get to your point of your question is, we have teams created to interview companies, bring them in, interview them, talk to them about what we want, what they can provide, and then kind of scorecard them, grade them, and then three to five companies will bid on it based on the 3 to 5 that we like and we think can do the job.
So that's a sort of a pre-bid screening.
Yes.
Okay. Great. And how easy is it to get 3 to 5 companies that will satisfy all the requirements? Yeah, most places that I've talked to don't have that many really skilled controls vendors. There's 2, 3, 4 in a city. Maybe in a big city you'll have more, but
we dual source our campus. So if it's the front end wise, the software, use either Siemens or Automated Logic, and that's what we decided before I came on board. That just easy to manage. You have not 50 vendors on site, and we have third party that are devices that are from other vendors. But as far as the controls, like automation.
Right. Okay. And IT just has to be happy with that. You both just have to be happy with that, I guess. Yeah. Okay.
Resources are what they are. Typically, Princeton is somewhat fortunate that we are in a location where there's more availability of good talent in the Philadelphia to New York City corridor kind of here.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is helpful. And from an IT point of view, there is mostly the idea of we need to be providing or supporting the vendors in knowing what to expect. I mean, it's typical of a vendor to be comfortable with putting in their technology into a certain type of environment, and they expect certain availability of things. For instance, domain name systems, authentication systems, those sorts of things, which we don't always provide depending on where we are putting the technology. So
Right.
it is important to find a vendor that has the right controls engineers, but also understands that the environment it's going into may not be the one that they're quite used to.
Yeah.
Letting them know that up front is actually an interesting part of the issue of bringing a vendor on board with any RFP or something like that.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So then in the whole spec process and also the bid review process, I'm guessing similar to that pre-interview, both groups, there's sort of a hybrid panel that reviews all of that. Would that be true?
People from different departments.
Yeah.
On interviews.
Okay. Great.
Yep. And then in the central IT organization, we now have a process that encourages different departments to, when they're making major changes, to have the ability to bring that to this particular type of committee, this review committee, architectural services review. And we have not traditionally done that, so we have, I won't say let departments flounder, although sometimes I'm sure the departments feel that way. It has not been a well-defined process up till now, and I think we're hoping that is getting better as time goes on.
Yeah, everything always flounders a little bit, and that creates the need for the process, right? So
yeah,
that's
exactly.
Natural. So talking about bids and new projects and all these things, a subject that often comes up is cybersecurity. So historically, cybersecurity has really been an IT subject. The building automation side, the OT side has kind of said, okay, IT's got it. How do you, as it's becoming more and more of a thing on the building automation and OT side, how do you share that load? Who does what?
So on the controls engineers, me and my partner Gary, we manage the user roles, not access to the network, and we also audit our users every 6 months biannually. We allow them what they can do in the automation system, gaining access to the network. Don't that comes from the IT side.
And that's a process that you've built, or that you were sort of told by IT that you should do?
Part of it collaboratively, I believe.
Yeah.
The auditing, I think, comes from IT. Audit our users at least biannually.
Yeah. Okay.
So from the IT side, obviously we could spend the entire hour on cybersecurity. So I feel somewhat fortunate that I'm not in the information security office, which has a tremendous task to secure a bunch of resources across an entire university campus. So I get to focus a little bit more with the critical infrastructure side of things, for trying to help the various owners, stakeholders in operational technology secure their systems. We do that. We've done various audits. In fact, one of the audits that was done of critical infrastructure across the board at university is the reason my job exists. They did one in 2014, and they recognized the fact that too many departments were doing their own thing, and we really needed to do a better job of making sure that everybody had the same access to good information about security and about how things are structured at the university. So that's been helpful, and then we also brought in other external vendors as time has gone by to validate that we are improving things in our risk profile and doing various risk remediation. Also familiar with doing specialized risk assessments within the data center, and we had a tremendous opportunity to test our risk procedures when we had a small server fire occur in our almost brand new data center in 2016. So that was a nice example of finding out that, in fact, most of the assumptions have been made about how to handle those situations actually worked very, very well. But having an actual fire that produces smoke and forces you to exercise your procedures and processes and recognize where there are gaps was definitely a nice exercise. It was a nice exercise because, in fact, the fire didn't cause any particular damage in the data center, but it really does point out how closely the IT organization needs to work with the OT organization to reduce risk, not only when we build things, but in the ongoing life cycle of operating those facilities. And as I said, I have a particular interest in data centers since that's part of my job role. So in that particular case, again, we can flip the idea of IT can provide some suggestions, and it's the operational technology side that provides some solutions to helping with reducing the risk. Now, some of those are more physical security risks, increasing the ability of our various independent detection systems to talk to each other, very much a controls problem. And that's an area that, for instance, when you asked at the beginning of projects that we worked on together, that would be an area that we've definitely worked on together.
Nothing like a small, non-impactful situation to really up your motivation to make sure those processes are right, and actually sort of sometimes it's hard to care a lot about them when they're all theoretical, so that really takes them out of theoretical.
It really does take it. It's definitely something that even after the fact, you can now point to that and say, this is why we're doing these things. This is why these controls are in place. This is why you have to do this. So, yeah. I'm not recommending that people go and start fires in their data centers.
No, not what we want people to leave this webinar with. Don't go start fires. I'm going to pull in a question here. We've had a few questions, so some of them we will save to the end, but one I want to address now is who designates IP addresses? So we probably are adding a lot of IP devices, IP addresses, device IDs, all those types of things. Who's designating those?
So I'll start with that, and then Adam can chime in. So from a central IT organization from the late 1990s, it has been the policy of the university to only permit devices that have been pre-registered onto the IP network. So everybody has to, before attaching their device, has to actually fill out a form about what the device is, where it'll be located, etc. And then the central IT organization actually assigns the IP address and gets the appropriate VLAN in place in that location, etc. So.
Okay. So that's a sort of a form that the IT organization owns and manages?
Yes, and it had been for a long time. It had been a highly customized piece of software specific to the university. We have since, in fact, in just in January, changed that to more of a ServiceNow type form that is a little bit faster turnaround for the people who want to add devices. The previous customized solution could take up to a day to actually authorize and allow the device to work on the network. The new process is virtually instantaneous.
Great. And then from the device ID side, Adam, do you want to chime in on that?
Yeah, so anything that gets connected to the building automation system on campus goes through either me or the other controls engineer. So we register the device with the software Kevin's talking about, and they give us the IP, but we give them the device ID, we give them the name, the IP address, and we have a massive spreadsheet that we track all that because you don't have a duplicate instance number. And it's a little, and cumbersome, but we haven't found a better way to manage tracking all the devices we have, and thousands of devices.
I think it's a great area for collaboration down the road. One of the reasons that he can't enter that information into the same ServiceNow database that's being used by IT is that the two organizations, the two departments, haven't really worked together to say these are the relevant pieces of information one needs to use when you classify a device as something that's for building automation. But clearly that can be done, and it would be of great value to the university to not have Gary and Adam have to track all that manually through a very large spreadsheet.
You've got your work cut out for you, Kevin.
There you go. Right. Always an opportunity. Always an opportunity.
Always, yeah. So speaking of interdepartment communication, how do you communicate with each other? Do you have regular meetings, or what does that look like?
So there's multiple avenues of communication. There is no specific formal communication set up right now between the departments per se. Clearly, when there are projects that are being run, we do have project meetings, project kickoff meetings, those sorts of things, where we would meet for a project sort of environment and goal. But as far as actively communicating in a formal mechanism, we don't do that. What we do instead is, as part of the fact that the position I'm in is supported by both facilities and the central IT organization, I am permitted, I guess that's the right word to use, to hotel in the same building where a lot of the facilities personnel are, including Adam and Gary. And I do that at least a day a week. I make sure that it's the same day every week so that people come to expect that you're there and that you can, that they can find you. So the hoteling space can move around a bit. It's a very busy building. And because of that, it gives me an opportunity to essentially stick my head in to the office that Gary and Adam both have together. And then there are other opportunities. Both Adam and I were co-sponsors of the Smart Campus meeting conference that we conducted here at Princeton in October 2018. So in that case, we had not what we would call project meetings, but regular meetings scheduled to go over how to pull off a conference.
Great. That's a great idea, and I can imagine that those informal conversations can be very useful.
So I can relate a story in that regard. In fact, talking about useful, not that I'm suggesting this is how things should get done, but one of those days I poked my head in the office. It was to talk about the data center risk reduction projects that we were working on, and ask if they could add essentially some scope to a vendor quote that we were hoping to get about doing a change to the control systems so that we could easily evacuate a smoky environment or any kind of environment from the data center in a very fast way. That was one of the outcomes from that fire, was that we found that we did not have a button we could push or a control that we could play with that would let us change the air quickly. So we had that sort of smoky smell throughout the data center for a while. So one of the things we wanted to change was, all right, well, let's change how we, or at least give ourselves an out as far as being able to move the outside air in a controlled way and be able to improve our environmentals. So I poked my head in. I think it was probably lunchtime, and I caught the people, Adam and Gary and another vendor, in there at the right time. They weren't heads down working on something, and literally in 15 minutes, the three of them had figured out a way of making it so that we didn't need to go ask the vendor for it. They figured out the appropriate area in the controls that we could actually play with to make this whole thing happen. So, I had it, not only did it was amazing. I wanted to go buy a lottery ticket after that one.
Yeah, it's amazing that, if you kind of just build that relationship and have the FaceTime, how much faster. Some small little things that don't need a huge amount of process can be dealt with. Process is good. Sometimes you need it, but sometimes you don't.
Sometimes just having the right people thinking about the right things at the right time.
Yeah. And being there every week probably increases the chance that you will get all those right people in the same place at the same time.
Usually
so, yeah. So part of this, you guys talking more and more and becoming much more collaborative. There are sort of different languages that both sides speak, all the building automation terms, BackNet, all that type of thing, IT terms. How have you adjusted to those different terminologies and the different languages that you both speak?
I've come from a controls background, so when I started as Maddox, there was no IT connections or hardware. So I took networking, a Network Plus course, and an A Plus course. The company paid for that. And it helps learn the terminology. I mean, I'm not an expert, but it's enough where you can talk to an IT person.
Your eyes don't just glaze over anymore when they start talking.
Oh, it has. I mean, everything's IT based now. Controls is more IT than environment. Everything's IT based.
And it's just becoming more and more that way.
Exactly.
I get to occasionally when I duck into his office, I look over Adam's shoulder, and yes, it would be difficult for the average person to look at what he's working on and say, well, that's an operational technology and not an IT thing. So yeah, I totally agree with that. I came in obviously with some knowledge about operational technologies, having a mechanical engineering background. So that terminology wasn't as difficult to pick up as the terminology associated with the Princeton environment. We tend to have done things a certain way for a long period of time. So there weren't a lot of new people in the IT department when I joined. So they all knew what they were talking about, and I was sort of wondering what the heck what I was missing. A concrete example of that is early on, I kept hearing about something called BASNet, B-A-S-N-E-T. And I'm thinking, well, that sounds like BackNet, but it's maybe some other kind of technology that I'm not aware of. And as it turned out, it was just the name that Princeton used for the particular VLAN that we put the BackNet devices onto. So it made perfect sense. It was now building automation system network, but it's one of those you feel kind of silly asking a question sometimes because everybody else is like, oh yeah, that's what it is.
And Google's
now I know the controls guys a bit better, and obviously I would just say, what the heck are you talking about?
Yeah, it's hard when you're new and you're trying to build rapport and learn all this language, and Google's not returning anything useful for that search.
What's up with that? Right? Yeah, Google should be able to answer that question.
Yeah, you need a Princeton Google.
Right, exactly. We'll work on that.
Yeah. Okay. Great. Another thing for your list, Kevin.
Yeah. Thanks. Appreciate that, Mark.
You're welcome. This is really helpful for you, isn't it? So how do you generally, I mean, clearly you've come a long way and you've had some really great examples of ways that you've collaborated, but any more examples of, or specific success stories of how you make each other better at your jobs and how things have improved since we've had Kevin coming in to sort of be that in-between person?
Yeah, it's great having somebody in Kevin's position that's the liaison between the controls and the IT world. You can go to Kevin and he talks to the head of this person or that department or that department. It's really a great position to have at Princeton. Somebody, a great resource.
And I think that having people, subject matter experts in the operational technology who are willing to talk to you, show you things, this is very important. From most IT people are introverts. They tend to view the world as a sort of a virtual environment because we basically are dealing with bits and bytes. And it's very valuable from the IT organization to be able to go to people like Adam and say, all right, so why is it you need to put your box here, not there? You know, why can't, why do you need wireless, that sort of thing? What is it that, and you can actually see why it is that it needs to be done that way. This is, you know, it's not just one of these, it's, you know, it's across every building on campus, and we have to do it this way, sort of thing.
Right.
So it's very important for IT to recognize that, you know, as Adam said at the beginning of this, that controls, building controls is a specialization. It needs to be treated in a certain way. It needs not with white gloves, but it needs to be treated as its own specialty and its own requirements and its own security needs, etc. So, and being able to go to the subject matter experts and have honest conversations about, well, you know, so IT needs to have some standards as well, and you need to meet those standards, but we certainly can understand that you have a specific need that doesn't meet those standards. Let's acknowledge that it won't meet that. We'll put some other types of support around that particular gap or risk or whatever, and we'll move forward and we'll get this done, we'll accomplish this together.
Yeah, that's a good point. Standards don't always work for everyone, and it's easy to say, no, you've got to fit that round peg in that square hole. But,
yeah.
Okay. Any words of advice for how to build a strong relationship? Obviously, great if you can hire, if everyone can just hire Kevin. But generally, I mean, even on your first day, it probably wasn't super easy to come in and say, I'm IT and I'm here to help. So what words of advice do you have for us?
I think working as a team is cliche, but it definitely is. You work with know the other department's role and their strategies, like Kevin said. Like they want to implement this security feature, and you're like, why do I need that? I've never had it, but they have a reason why they want to lock down this port, right? Because there's a vulnerability, and if you work together and figure out a way to accomplish it, both sides are successful.
Absolutely, and you really have to ultimately build that trust relationship, and you build that trust relationship by accomplishing some things together. It's right. Nobody's going to believe me by just coming to a meeting and say, "Hey, I'm IT. I'm here to help." Right? That's, you know, the old joke about from the government. I'm here to help. Right? Nobody's quite sure that that's entirely true. So it's a question of working with the teams that are actively trying to get something accomplished and helping them to accomplish that. And once you've done that on a few occasions, then everything else tends to fall in place. Everybody recognizes that you're all striving for the same goal, and that just people have different outlooks, viewpoints, needs, requirements, and different skill sets that work together well to bring about hopefully a positive conclusion to it. Not every project works, but you can learn things either way. So I'd like to go back and change some things that happened before I started. I'm sure that Adam is the same way, and that ultimately, now that the two departments are hopefully more working together in a trusting, collaborative way, that we will eventually get there.
Yeah, and if those things hadn't happened, they probably wouldn't have created your position.
Right. Exactly. So I'm happy enough. I have a love-hate relationship with that fact. So yeah.
Yeah, of course.
All right.
So that's all of my questions, but we do have quite a few questions from our audience. So if people have more questions, feel free to submit them. In the meantime, we had a question about, so I know, Kevin, you mentioned your IP address software, but are there any other tools that you use to collaborate between the two departments?
ServiceNow has become the de facto way for any non-IT, OIT department to request services from OIT. But like anything, it takes a while to get a new ticketing system, a new set of processes in place. So that it's a constant, what do we say? The types of offerings that are done through that mechanism, through that tool, through ServiceNow, are constantly being tweaked. But I would say that most of the time, that's the first step of invoking of any department really invoking a service request to the department, whether that is an IP address assignment or something dealing with their workstation, or something dealing with an immediate issue that they might have, some sort of authentication issue or access issue.
Great. It's all centralized. And then on the IT side, the request comes in, I'm guessing somebody's in charge. There are probably a team of people looking at that, and then they kind of propagate up depending on the size or immediacy of the project.
Yeah, that would be a good way of putting it. What doesn't happen is if it's something that involves people from multiple departments, not OIT specific departments, then it gets more manual, right? Because then we're not all using the same tool. So while the central IT organization uses this tool, facilities uses a completely different tool to generate its work orders, et cetera. So there are definitely some areas there that we can see collaboration in the future really be helpful. Including, sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say with hardware support, if we need another port opened up or installed, that's more of an email to the hardware support manager, and then he creates a work order for their guys. But that's not very automated, but it's another thing we use.
Yeah. Okay. So I know, Kevin, you mentioned wireless, right? You're not doing a lot right now, but you're looking at doing more. So someone wanted to know, with the presence of wireless becoming more relevant, is there an increased security concern?
Oh, absolutely. There's a huge security concern with using wireless. So back to the cybersecurity question, right? The prevalence of wireless, however, is clearly a 21st century. We have to do this sort of thing. This is how we are going to be deploying Internet of Things, devices, sensors, etc. So it is a security concern. It's a security concern we take very seriously, but that we have to deal with. And so we are going to be dealing with it. Princeton itself has a program, ongoing program right now, in fact, to fund a major upgrade to our entire network infrastructure. And part of that upgrade that's relevant to this question is, one, making sure that wireless is no longer considered a convenience service. It is why wireless is our first network. It's the network that we are going to focus, making sure is always available, always secure, et cetera, and make it as easy as possible for people to join our wireless network in the right way. And then the second part of that network modernization is something called role-based access control. And the idea behind that is that now the network actually takes care of determining whether a device or a person has access to a certain resource. So whether you're connected through the wireless network or through the wired network no longer matters so much. The network is going to have the ability to say, okay, you have this role, and that role is permitted or not permitted to access the building automation. Now that's a work in progress. We won't get to that point for a little while yet, but that's one of the reasons we feel that we can start putting more of our critical infrastructure into the communicating wirelessly. But one would also suspect that for multiple reasons, including security, we would always have some sort of wired backup for certain types of systems. Fire alarm systems come to mind.
Okay. Again, on the topic of wireless, and this is a more technical one for you, Kevin. Someone wants to know if it's possible to use one wireless access point to provide multiple access provisions for separate VLANs. For example, one for public access and the other for the building automation stuff.
So yes, yeah. So it's an interesting question because traditionally Princeton has segmented physically our networks so that today our critical infrastructure systems, by and large, it actually does not include the building automation system, interestingly enough, do run on a separate physical network, set of switches, that sort of thing. And on that physical network, there is no wireless access. And that's one of the reasons that we can sort of keep that secure from a from certain types of security concerns. However, the access points that we use at the university are more than capable of supplying multiple wireless networks, some of which could be used for critical infrastructure, building automation systems, while others are more used for public access. And then there are sort of protections that are built into the deployed wireless system that allow it to say, this device cannot talk wirelessly to this device that's on the same access point for whatever reason, which is something you'd want to prevent when you do use those access points.
Right.
Does that make sense?
I think it makes sense, but I didn't ask. So yeah. Hopefully it makes sense.
The short answer was yes. So
yeah.
Yes.
We'll just yeah. Sorry, Adam. Most of these questions are from Kevin, I think, because most of the people on our webinar are building automation people and they want the IT side. So
I'm fine with it.
Don't take it personally. So somebody wanted to know about BBMDs, and I can't remember exactly when this question was asked, but they were wondering if you manage them by one system or the other. I'm not sure if that's, I'm not exactly sure what that's referring to, or the two systems using separate BackNet IP networks.
So we don't have any BBMDs on campus. We have thousands of devices, and because we're on a private VLAN, we don't need any BBMDs. That was one of the main reasons we wanted to go to. We have one subnet.
And it's one big flat network.
Yes.
You may have blown a few minds there.
Yeah, I mean, and the central IT organization, typically wouldn't be thrilled about that, and that's one of those obvious areas where, as we move forward with our network modernization, they may in fact start needing some more devices along those lines, but hopefully not. We'll manage to make the network accommodate the need without implementing the BBMD.
Yeah. Can you explain, so you were mentioning two different VLANs. Can you explain how they work together and also how many control systems are currently on campus?
How many what? I'm sorry.
Control system.
So we have two VLANs. We created a second, we don't share any information across them, so they're not tied together. The second VLAN was for devices that we found don't handle a lot of traffic, and no matter what we did, firmware or whatever, they just don't handle a lot of traffic. So what we did is we had the IT create a second VLAN and move those devices to the second VLAN, and one was, and I think most of them were lighting. We found that because our lighting for a football stadium, the lights were turning on and off in the middle of the night.
And if you want to learn more about that, we did a whole webinar with Adam's counterpoint part Gary a year or two ago. So feel free to check out that webinar, learn all about that. All right, so back to IP address or IP addressing here. As we discussed, more and more devices are becoming IP. Do you recommend assigning static IP addresses manually to controllers, or assigning IP addresses by utilizing reservations defined by MAC address?
I didn't catch the last part of that, but I think the answer from the central IT organization is that we would prefer devices that can use some sort of dynamic request for IP addresses. And if we need to give them the same IP address over and again, we can handle that on the central registration side. We can make sure that that device always gets the same address whenever it requests it. And we're also moving into a world where it's not simply IPv4 type addresses we're talking about, but as we start talking more IoT devices that, if you believe the people who predict the future, having millions of these devices on your network will almost certainly require that we have IPv6 addressing capabilities, and nobody wants to manually assign an IPv6 address.
Have you or your vendors begun looking at BackNet Secure Connect or done any planning for that or thought about it?
We haven't done any planning. We did talk to the vendors about it. They are coming out with panels that are going to have the ability to have secure BackNet. But that's about as far as we've gone so far.
Okay. Yeah, sounds great. It's not a fully ratified thing, so that's probably also make it a bit hard to plan if it's not a complete done thing. But good to know. This is the last question I have, so if other people have more questions, feel free to ask them. What is your preferred method for remote connectivity to access the building automation stuff so that you don't have to come onto site at 2 in the morning and figure everything out? Do you have a VPN client or some other way to do it?
We have VPN and it's Google authenticated. So you have to VPN, Google authenticate, and then desktop ones for network.
Now, I think there's always improvements that can be made. Our central VPN product certainly works for the application. It's less desirable for third-party vendors that may need to get in to work on the systems as well.
Right.
So we do have solutions around that, mostly around the lines of, which I think is fairly common, of saying we need to initiate the connection from the university to the third-party vendor and then have them work on the product that way. So again, the hope is that part of our network modernization, we will actually provide some improvements in terms of not only Adam's ability to get to the system he needs to work on, but third parties who need to get to those systems who, it's just a requirement for critical infrastructure systems.
Perfect. Questions are flooding in now. People are like, we're almost done. I have to get my question in. Do you have any data streams from building automation systems to any cloud services?
So we do have data streams, but we use XML field servers. We export through FTP some CSV data, but other than that, we don't really. It's taxing on your automation system, so we try to stay away from that.
We do tend to value campus as a lab type of efforts here at Princeton. So that some of that is with building automation systems. There's a lot of demand for data from the building automation systems. I know a lot of demand for information about energy consumption, et cetera, as well. Efforts that we're in a good position to support, I think.
Right. And like most campuses, you do have a way to make that available to your students.
Correct, yeah.
Okay. Great. Well, we're going to call it there. If people have more questions, you're more than welcome to send them to me and we'll get them answered. Thank you so much. That was very insightful. We learned a lot, and I hope everyone on the webinar did as well. Thanks again, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you. Good talking with you.
Yeah, you too. Bye.
Bye.